The unthinkable has just happened. Europe has made the gravest mistake in its modern history. It did not sanction a rival nation. It did not threaten a military adversary. It reached across the English Channel and personally attacked the British crown. European officials have declared King Charles III unconstitutional. They have said openly and on record that he has no power, no authority, and no place in any conversation about the future of Europe. They have demanded his removal. And in doing so, they have awakened something that Brussels was never prepared to face. They have awakened the royal family. Stay with us, because what Prince William just said in response is something no European leader will ever forget. Prince William directly said to von der Leyen, "You are an unelected woman." To understand why this moment is so explosive, you have to understand what Europe actually did. This was not a casual remark. This was not a miscued sentence taken out of context by the media. This was a deliberate, calculated, coordinated political attack launched by senior European officials, directly targeting the legitimacy of the British monarchy itself. They called King Charles III unconstitutional. They said he holds no real power. They said his role is ceremonial at best and an obstacle at worst. And then they went further. They demanded his removal from any position of influence over matters that touch European interests. Let that sink in for a moment. Europe did not challenge a British policy. Europe did not object to a British trade position or a diplomatic stance. Europe reached into the heart of British national identity, grabbed the institution that the British people have built, defended, and cherished for over 1,000 years, and declared it illegitimate. This was not politics. This was provocation. This was a slap across the face of every single person in the United Kingdom who has ever stood for the national anthem, who has ever watched a coronation, who has ever felt pride in what the British crown represents. And the response from inside the royal family came faster and harder than anyone in Brussels had anticipated. Prince William did not issue a carefully worded statement through a palace spokesperson. He did not send a diplomatic note through back channels. He did not smile politely and absorb the humiliation the way European officials expected him to. Prince William responded with a fury that the House of Windsor has not shown publicly in living memory. And the words he used were not the words of a diplomat. They were the words of a man who had reached his absolute limit. He looked at the situation directly, and he said what millions of British people were already thinking. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is an unelected woman. She was not voted into her position by the citizens of Europe. She was not chosen through any democratic process in which ordinary people participated. She was selected behind closed doors by European political elites who decided among themselves who should hold the most powerful unelected position on the continent. And Prince William made sure the entire world heard that fact clearly and without apology. "You are an unelected woman," he said. "Get out." The shockwave from those words hit Brussels like a physical force. European officials who had grown comfortable treating Britain as a diminished post-Brexit nation suddenly found themselves face to face with something they had completely miscalculated. They had assumed that insulting the crown would go unanswered. They had assumed that the royal family would retreat into its traditional silence and allow the political class to handle the fallout. They were wrong, completely and catastrophically wrong, because Prince William did not stop at words. He made it absolutely clear that the insult delivered to King Charles and to the British monarchy would carry real and immediate consequences. He stated plainly that Britain would not allow this attack to go unanswered. He warned that every single European deal currently in existence was now under review. Every trade arrangement, every cooperation framework, every bilateral agreement that Britain and European nations have built since Brexit was now sitting on the table, and Prince William was holding the match. "We will terminate all European deals," he said. "You have insulted us. We will not leave you now. You will resign." Inside the European Commission, the panic that followed was immediate. Staff who had been preparing routine briefing documents suddenly found themselves pulled into emergency sessions. Senior advisors began frantically calculating what a complete breakdown in British and European relations would actually mean in practical terms. And the numbers they came back with were terrifying. Britain is one of the largest trading partners for multiple European economies. German manufacturers, French agricultural exporters, Italian luxury goods producers, Spanish service industries, all of them depend on open and cooperative access to British markets. If Prince William followed through, if Britain actually began dismantling the frameworks that hold these trading relationships together, the economic damage to Europe would be severe immediate, and very difficult to reverse. But here's what made the situation even more dangerous for Brussels. Prince William was not acting alone. Sources close to the royal family confirmed that the response being delivered was not an impulsive reaction from a single member of the House of Windsor. This was coordinated, this was deliberate. King Charles himself, the man whom Europe had just declared unconstitutional and demanded be removed, was fully aware of what his son was saying, and he had not asked him to stop. The king did not issue a calming statement. The king did not reach out to European leaders to smooth things over. The silence from Buckingham Palace was not the silence of a man caught off guard. It was the silence of a man who had given his blessing. And that changes everything, because when the king of the United Kingdom stands behind his son's warning to Europe, when the entire royal family moves in the same direction at the same moment, you are no longer looking at a family dispute that can be quietly resolved. You are looking at something that has not happened in the modern era. You are looking at the British royal family in open rebellion against the European political establishment. You are looking at an institution that has survived world wars, abdication crises, and centuries of political upheaval. And that institution is now pointing its full weight directly at Brussels. European leaders had spent years believing that post-Brexit Britain was weakened, isolated, and desperate for European goodwill. They had spent years treating Britain as a cautionary tale about the dangers of leaving the European Union. They had used Britain as a warning to any other nation that might consider following the same path, and in doing so, they had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had confused Britain's patience with weakness. They had confused the royal family's silence with submission. And now, the bill for that miscalculation has arrived. The question that is keeping European leaders awake tonight is not whether Prince William meant what he said. The fury in his words was real. The consequences he outlined were specific. The backing from Buckingham Palace was unmistakable. The question that is tearing through emergency meetings in Brussels, Berlin, Paris, and Rome right now is something far more frightening. If Europe does not respond, if von der Leyen does not resign, if the demands made against King Charles are not withdrawn immediately, what exactly is Prince William prepared to do next? And the answer to that question is something that no one in the European Commission is prepared to hear. The morning after Prince William's statement, Europe woke up to a reality it had never prepared for. The carefully constructed narrative that Brussels had built around post-Brexit Britain, the story of a weakened island nation stumbling through the consequences of its own decisions, was collapsing in real time, because Britain was not stumbling. Britain was advancing, and it was advancing with the full moral authority of a royal family that had just been publicly humiliated and had chosen to respond not with silence but with steel. Von der Leyen's office released a brief statement early that morning, attempting to clarify what European officials had meant by their remarks about King Charles. The statement was careful. It was measured. It was the kind of language that Brussels specializes in. Words designed to say everything and nothing at the same time, phrases crafted to de-escalate without actually admitting fault. But the statement failed. It failed because the British people had already heard what Europe said. They had already processed the insult, and no amount of diplomatic language was going to walk that back. Inside 10 Downing Street, the British government found itself in an extraordinary position. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had spent his entire tenure carefully managing Britain's complicated relationship with Europe, trying to find workable arrangements on trade, security cooperation, and the dozens of practical issues that arise when a nation separates itself from a bloc it was embedded in for decades. That careful, patient work was now irrelevant because the royal family had moved. And when the royal family moves in Britain, the political ground shifts beneath everyone's feet. Sunak convened an emergency cabinet session within hours of Prince William's statement becoming public. The meeting was not about whether Britain should respond to Europe's insult. That question had already been answered. The meeting was about how far Britain was prepared to go. And according to sources present in that room, the answer that emerged was further than anyone in Europe had imagined possible. British trade officials were instructed to begin a formal review of every existing agreement with European Union member states. This review was not a symbolic gesture. It was not a negotiating tactic designed to create leverage at a future bargaining table. It was a genuine and thorough examination of which agreements served British interests and which ones could be terminated without causing sufficient damage to Britain itself to make termination unacceptable. The preliminary findings from that review landed on the cabinet table within 24 hours, and the numbers were remarkable. Britain had far more flexibility than European leaders had assumed. The economic interdependence that Brussels had always used as an invisible leash on British behavior was significantly weaker than the European Commission had publicly claimed. Germany understood this first. The German government, which had been quietly dismissive of British complaints since Brexit, suddenly found its industrial lobby in uproar. Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz collectively export hundreds of thousands of vehicles to Britain every single year. If Britain began imposing retaliatory trade measures, if British ports started applying the kind of friction to German goods that would make them uncompetitive against American and Asian alternatives, the damage to German industry would be immediate and politically catastrophic for a government already struggling with an economy that had been underperforming for years. France was in no better position. French agricultural exports, French luxury goods, and the French wine and spirits industries all depend heavily on British consumer markets. The British public spends billions annually on French products, and that spending does not disappear overnight, but it can be redirected. And Prince William's statement had just given every British consumer a reason to think carefully about where their money was going. But beyond the economics, something deeper was happening across Britain, something that European leaders had not factored into any of their calculations because they had never truly understood it. The British public was uniting behind the crown. Social media was flooded with expressions of support for King Charles and Prince William. Ordinary British people who had never paid close attention to diplomatic affairs were suddenly engaged, suddenly furious, and suddenly fully behind the royal family's decision to push back. The monarchy, which European commentators had spent years describing as an outdated and irrelevant institution, had just demonstrated something that no elected politician in Britain could have achieved in that moment. It had unified the nation. And von der Leyen was watching this happen with growing concern because she had made the cardinal mistake of underestimating what she was dealing with. She had treated the British crown as a political target when it was, in fact, something far more powerful. It was a symbol, and you cannot sanction a symbol. You cannot negotiate with a symbol. You cannot issue a clarifying statement that makes a symbol forgive you. When you attack what a nation holds sacred, you do not weaken that nation, you harden it. You give it a clarity of purpose that no political speech could ever manufacture. Europe had handed Britain that clarity on a silver platter. And now, with the British government formally reviewing every trade agreement, with the royal family refusing to stand down, and with the British public fully mobilized behind the crown, von der Leyen faced a decision that her entire career had never prepared her for. But what she did not yet know, what was about to emerge from behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, was that Prince William had not yet played his most powerful card. The world is watching. Europe made the mistake of attacking the wrong institution. Prince William has drawn a line that cannot be uncrossed, and the clock is ticking for von der Leyen. Will she resign? Will Europe back down? Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We are tracking every development in real time. Comment below, is Prince William right? The mainstream media will not tell you the truth.